Welcome to class PM. The previous class we have studied about various kinds of nutrition, right? And we have seen that there are two different types of nutrition generally seen in plants. That is autotrophic nutrition and heterotrophic nutrition. So we have discussed about the autotrophic mode of nutrition, where plants synthesize their own food using raw materials from the surroundings. And we know that plants can synthesize their food because they have a green pigment called chlorophyll in it, right? But there are few plants which do not have any pigment called chlorophyll. But how do they derive the food? How do they get the food? Do they have separate cells to prepare food, or is someone there to cook and give them? No. Like plants and unlike animals and humans, these plants also depend upon other organisms to derive food. Okay, so how do they derive food from other organisms? Yes, there are different modes of nutrition in which they derive or get the food from organisms. So before we start up with that, let us see what is heterotrophic nutrition. Let us recall the definition what we have learned in the previous class. That is, organisms which derive food from other organisms possess heterotrophic nutrition, and the organism is said to be heterotroph. Or you can also define it as organisms which cannot synthesize their own food. That means, as I've told you, as they don't have any chlorophyll in them, they cannot synthesize. Ultimately, they have to depend upon other organisms. So there are different modes of deriving nutrition from different organisms. So in case of plants, this heterotrophic nutrition is classified into two different types based on the way they derive the food. First is parasitic nutrition, and the second one is saprophytic nutrition or saprotrophic nutrition. Now first let us discuss about parasitic nutrition. So when we talk about parasitic nutrition, the word itself says parasite. Means what? A parasite is an organism which lives on the body of an other organism, or which lives inside the body of other organism. That means they cannot make their own food. So they have to search for one of the hosts which can give food to them. Just like when guests come to your house, what do? You feed them, you give them good food, you will give them a good hospitality. That means you are becoming the host. I don't say that they are parasites, okay? So we become the host for the guest, right? In the same way, in case of parasitic nutrition, they derive the food from other organisms. Let me give a small example of one of the parasite, leech. We know that leeches are generally present in fresh water, right? And we know that this leech sucks blood, right? How do they suck blood? They stick onto the surface skin of other organism which is said to be the host, say like buffalo. Okay, if they stick to the buffalo will become the host, and this leech is the parasite which is sucking the blood and deriving food from other. Right? In the same way, there are also parasitic plants. Now let us see how these parasitic plants derive the food. So when we talk about an parasitic plant, example cuscuta. It is also called as amarbil. So this cuscuta plant is generally, it seems to be a yellow kind of thread hanging, okay, a creeper hanging from the trees. So this is generally seen. I don't know if you might have seen it or not. This cuscuta seems to be yellow flowered thread kind of structure which is hanging onto the big trees. So what do? As they don't have any chlorophyll pigment, they cannot synthesize food, but they have to derive the food some or the other way. So what do? They grow on these big trees and they derive the nutrients which are being synthesized in the plant body. So that means they take up the nutrients of the host tree and they start surviving. So this kind of nutrition which is obtained by living on the body of an organism is said to be what? Parasitic nutrition. So apart from this parasitic nutrition, there is also other mode of nutrition where plants become carnivores. What do you mean by carnivores? Are plants carnivores? Can plants eat flesh? It is not exactly carnivores, but there are plants, okay, which eat insects. So we know that there are many insects, right? And for your information, insect family is the huge family, right? There are few plants which eat insects, okay? And these insects become the food for the plants. Now, for your surprise, there are such plants in our surroundings, and one of those plants is pitcher plant. So in case of this pitcher plant, the leaf is modified into a pitcher shape, Okay, and the apex of the leaf will act as a lid, and the surface inside this picture leaf has hair in it. Okay, now as soon as this insect comes onto the surface or gets in contact with the picture leaf, immediately the leaf drags it or traps the insect inside the leaf body, where this hair-like structures which are present, they entangle the insect, and as they entangle the insect, what do? They try to produce digestive juices, and these digestive juices will digest the insect inside the leaf. So such plants are said to be insectivorous plants. What are they called? Insectivorous plants. So apart from this picture plant, there is also Venus flytrap, which is also considered to be a insectivorous plant, right? So this is one of the mode of nutrition where they derive food from other organisms. Now coming to saprophytic nutrition or saprotrophic nutrition. So when we talk about sapros in Greek means decay or dead parts. So now you might have a question in your mind, like why are we talking about dead parts? Yes, there are few organisms which derive the food from dead and decaying parts. So how do they derive food from dead and decay parts? Yes, they take up the food from the nutrients which are present in the dead and decay parts of the body into the form of a solution. That means they take up the nutrients and convert them into a form of solution, and then they use this solution as food for them. So let us discuss about this saprophytic nutrition in detail. When we talk about the saprophytic nutrition, I think I have to tell you one simple activity which you all can do at home. Right, so the activity is nothing but collect a bread mold. Okay, take a small bread mold, and bread is everywhere available. If you don't have at home also, you can go get it from your supermart or some other mart which is close by to you, and moist the surface of the bread mold. Okay, what are you supposed to do? You are supposed to moist the surface of the bread mold by sprinkling water onto it. Now put this moist bread mold in a warm place for 2 to 3 days and leave it, and after 2 to 3 days you just go and look what has happened to the bread mold. You see that there are small dotted structure, okay, cottony thread kind of structure, which seem to be the white or buff colored or light grey greenish color appear on the surface of the bread mold. And what are this cotton thread kind of structure which is growing on the bread mold? That is nothing but fungi. When you observe this fungi under microscope, this would be the structure of the fungi, where it will have a spore sac, which is filled with spores of fungi, with a filament which supports it to hold on to the substratum. Substratum could be bread or anything, right? So now this fungi, how do fungi derive the food? The fungi starts taking the starch which is present in the bread mold. We know that starch is nothing but a carbohydrate, right? So as bread is rich in carbohydrate, it has starch in it, right? So now this fungi which is growing on the bread mold will start deriving the starch and convert it into a solution form, and this is how they derive energy or food. So this type of nutrition, from where they get the food from the dead and decay parts and then convert it into a solution, is said to be saprophytic nutrition. And this saprophytic nutrition is also known as saprotrophic nutrition. And the organism which undergoes or which performs saprophytic nutrition is said to be a saprophyte. Now, as we are discussing about fungi, let us talk about few more examples of fungi. See, during rainy seasons, we usually see that umbrella kind of small fluffy things start growing at the corners of the wall where there is wet, or on the branches, or in the damp places wherever it is wet. What are those? Those are mushrooms. Please ensure that you are not supposed to eat these mushrooms which grow everywhere in the damp conditions, because they are not edible mushrooms. And you also see that the fungi which grows on pickles, yeah, and the fungi grows on your curries. So if at all, if your mother cooks the food for the dinner, and all of a sudden your father comes and says that we are going out for a dinner to a restaurant, your mother forgets to keep the cooked food in the refrigerator. She leaves it on the table and goes to the restaurant along with you, right? After 2-3 days, if she tries to open the same vessel and see, on the surface of the curry which has been prepared, definitely the dish would be covered with white cotton thread kind of structure, that is nothing but fungi. So this eating such stale food is unhealthy. So please discard it if you have found that. Okay. And then this fungi, there are, all the time I've been talking that this fungi is not good, but there are few fungi which are also useful. Do you know yeast? Have you ever heard about yeast? Do you know where it is used? Generally, we all love eating bakery stuff, especially the breads, right? Cakes. And when we eat that, we feel that it is fluffy, spongy. And how come this fluffiness and sponginess is given to the bread? That is, they add yeast cells, that is yeast fungi to it, due to which the bread becomes fluffy and spongy. That is how it tastes good, right? Apart from this, this fungi is also used as medicine. It is also used in preparation of medicine. So these are the different modes of nutrition, okay, apart from autotrophic, where the organisms try to derive the food from other organisms. So there are fungi which are useful too. So these are the different methods of nutrition. Now there is one more type of nutrition. I don't say exactly it is nutrition, a kind of relationship. So before I explain you about this kind of relationship, I just wanted to tell you a small story which generally happens at every home, right? Imagine if your mom is not at home, if she is out of station and there is no one to cook food for you and you have to go to school. So when you go to school, you don't carry your lunch box as your mother is not at home. But during lunch time, will you starve or will your friends allow you to starve? No, obviously not. There is a small saying like sharing is caring, yeah, right? So all of us will see whenever you have to feel like, whenever you feel like eating something which your friend is having, then you definitely say that sharing is caring. So what does your friend do? He will try to share a part of his lunch box to you so that you don't starve. By doing this, what is happening over there? A strong relationship is being built between you and your friend, right? So this is how you can build up a nice relationship, being friendly to each other, sharing the things, right? So such a type of nutrition or such a type of relationship is not only seen in case of humans. Not only we are good at sharing, even plants are also good at sharing. And the process of sharing and helping each other is known as symbiotic relationship, or you can also call it as symbiosis. So let me give you an example of this. So we know that whenever it is rainy or wherever it is damp, that is wet, you see that green color structures start growing on that particular place. Usually you see it in the corner of the rooms or under the sink or wherever the place is wet in your corridor. You see that a green colored structure starts growing, right? And what is this green colored structure which starts growing is known as alga or algae, right? So this algae, if you remember, it is an autotroph. Why is it an autotroph? Because it can synthesize its own food as it has chlorophyll in it. Now, this algae, upon this algae, there are other organisms which live called as lichens. What are they called? Lichens. So, this lichens start growing over the surface of the algae. So, now these lichens are non-photosynthetic. Means what? They cannot synthesize their food. So, they are not autotrophic. Definitely, they have to go for heterotrophic mode of nutrition. So, they have to derive the food from other organisms. So, what do? These lichens which are present, they protect the algae. That means they provide protection. Instead, what do? They derive food which has been prepared from the algae. That means they are helping each other. Lichens provide protection to algae and algae provides food which is needed for the lichens. That means they are helping each other. In this process, both of them are benefited. Lichens are getting food from algae and algae is getting protection from lichens. What do you mean by protection? Why is this to be protected? These have to be protected from the enemies like predators. So this is how they're helping each other. That means in this process, both the individuals are benefited. So this process of relationship is said to be symbiotic relationship or symbiosis or mutual symbiosis. So can you give me other example where you see this kind of symbiotic relationship? If you remember the previous class, we have studied that the rhizobium will collect or absorb the nitrogen from the air and then fix it into the root nodules of plants, right? So let us take the same example, another example of bean family. Okay, so this bean family which is present, they cannot take the nitrogen from the atmosphere. That means they cannot absorb the gaseous form of nitrogen. They can only take the nitrogen in the form of soluble salt. So now how do? They cannot take it. So they need a help of other organism which can help them to get this nitrogen. So as I've explained in the previous lessons, we know that this rhizobium is a bacteria which will take up the nitrogenous gas, that is gas from the atmosphere, and fix it into the root nodules. And this rhizobium is again a non-photosynthetic organism. That means it cannot synthesize its food. Now what is it doing? It is helping bean family by fixing nitrogen into the soil, right? And now what is bean family doing to rhizobium? It is providing the food, that is the nutrients which are required for the growth of the rhizobium bacteria. That means they are mutually helping each other, due to which both the organisms are benefited. At the same way, they are helping each other to survive. So rhizobium will fix the gaseous nitrogen into the root nodules of bean family, right? And then what does these bean plants do? They synthesize the food and they share the nutrients to the bacteria so that the bacteria can survive. That means both are at the safer zone, right? So most of these bean families and moong family, that is moong dal, all this, they derive this nitrogen from rhizobium bacteria. In turn, they help this bacteria by providing the nutrients. So these are the different modes of obtaining nutrition in plants apart from autotrophic nutrition. Yeah, as discussed, we have been discussing about the symbiotic relationship. Now I have a question. Like, the symbiotic relationship will help many of the organisms to have a mutual understanding so that they can share what they have and they can survive. Now there is a question. How do we recycle or replenish the nutrients in the soil? Can this be done? Yes, we all know that farmers use different kinds of fertilizers and manures to grow the crop, right? And this manure and fertilizers which are added, they help in proper growth of crop or a healthy productivity, right? And we know that the soil, the plants need nutrients and they take it up from the soil. And you see that this is a continuous process where the plants take up the nutrients from the soil, and one fine day the soil will definitely lack the nutrients, or it will become a nutrient deficient soil, right? So what in such case? We know that plants need most of the nitrogen to prepare proteins, right? And we know that there are plants which cannot take up atmospheric nitrogen. So as I've told you, this rhizobium which is present, most of the leguminous family members, that is bean, moong, dal, all these are produced from leguminous family. What is this family called as? Bean family, leguminous. This is called as leguminous family. So most of this family produces maximum dal. Okay, moong, urad, all these dals are produced from leguminous family, beans and everything. So as I've told you, as these plants cannot take the nitrogen in the form of gaseous state, they have to take it in the form of soluble state. So what do? This rhizobium bacteria which is present, it will show a mutual relationship by converting the atmospheric nitrogen into nitrates. Okay, the rhizobium will convert the rhizobium bacteria which is present, convert atmospheric nitrogen into nitrates and nitrites, soluble form of nitrates and nitrites. And where does this soluble form of nitrates and nitrites go? These have been taken up by bean family. You see that the rhizobium which is present, the bacteria, will convert the atmospheric nitrogen into soluble form of nitrates and nitrites, which are taken up by the roots of bean family, or you can say leguminous family. And what do? They synthesize food. And what is this rhizobium doing? As it cannot synthesize, it is converting and giving it to family of bean. And what is this bean family doing? It is providing what? The nutrients required for the survival of rhizobium bacteria. So this is how, this is how the nitrogen is replenished or recycled in the soil, where I don't think that the farmer has to continuously use fertilizers which are usually rich in nitrates, phosphorus and phosphates. So this is how the recycling of nutrients is naturally done on the earth's crust or in the soil. So now we have learnt about different types of nutritions or modes of nutrition in case of plants apart from autotrophic nutrition, right? We can also sometimes consider this insectivorous plants to be a partial heterotrophs. Why do we call them as partial heterotrophs? Because they derive the food by eating insects. That means they are depending upon other organism for survival. So what is heterotrophic? The organisms which derive on food from other organisms are said to be heterotrophs. So sometimes these insectivorous plants can also be considered as partial heterotrophs.